Thanks for joining us, Martin. I'll hand over to you to take us through mobility strategy.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Okay, well, thanks for everyone for joining us this morning. My name's Martin. Agenda for today is to pretty much go through a couple of pieces here in terms of just recapping the benefits of BYOD, what are the drivers out there, to also cover off some of the reasons as to why you might need a strategy for the implementation and for the deployment into production of these sorts of technologies. How to go about putting together a BYOD strategy, sort of cover off 5 different points in that, and then to throw it open for Q&A at the end of the session. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things as well. As Oliver said, if you've got any questions, please feel free to submit them through the chat window, and we'll be monitoring those. We've got a couple of people here, and we can either take those directly or probably will end up answering those at the end as well, just because of the time limitations. Right, so we're also going to make a recording of the session, so you can distribute the link at the end if you want to other colleagues if required. So thank you very much. At one point I'm also going to bring in one of my colleagues just to talk about specific customer requirements as well. So without any ado, let's get on to it. So what is BYOD and what are the drivers out there? So really one of the main things that we're seeing out there is the requirement for customers actually both wanting to open up their endpoint devices, so basically to get away from the concept of an SOE laptop, a corporate issued laptop, to allow people to bring in whatever devices that they would like to. And in terms of either doing this from an additional productivity standpoint, and also to allow people to work in new ways, in more modern ways, in ways that they would like to do. So simple definition there of BYOD is any device with any ownership used anywhere. So that also implies ubiquitous mobility, which is really, I guess, the subtext in all of this as well. Mobility's been the driver out there. We've seen a lot more adoption of wireless and mobility technologies in the enterprise space, and now with the widespread adoption of very powerful handheld devices and smartphones and tablets, we're also seeing the consumerization of a lot of enterprise devices there. And also these devices can be either purchased by the employer and provided to their employees. We're seeing quite a bit of that out there at the moment, in addition to the more traditional scenario, which is end users wanting to bring their own devices into work. And also the fact that, I guess, the traditional boundaries of an organization are being blurred. It used to just be that there were employees working in an enterprise. Today we're actually seeing a much greater use of contractors and third-party resources, various suppliers, all having complex interreactions and interactions with enterprises today. And they all have data requirements, they all have requirements to actually access the corporate network in different ways. And in doing so, there are some, I guess, some implications and some issues that arise as a result of these new workflows. So before we actually get down into the strategy side of things, one other sort of introductory slide that I've got here is a snapshot of a large enterprise customer. And really this sort of parallels what we've seen in a lot of other organizations that are out there. This may not be identically the same for all customers, but this really does sort of map out an emerging trend that we're seeing there in the marketplace. So what this is a poll of the types of devices and the quantities of those devices on this corporate network mapped out over a 2-year period. So what we see here is the, I guess, the initial large deployment of corporate-sponsored BlackBerries in June 2010, where we're seeing by far and away it's the greatest majority of devices there on the network. And then over the course of the next 2 years, the exponential growth of iDevices in particular, but also Android as well, on the network, and also the fact that this is sort of continuing to grow. And what we're seeing is a very diverse mix of devices, not just operating systems, but even screen form factors in terms of the difference between an iPad and an iPhone. And the sort of flatlining or gradual decline of the more traditional enterprise mobile devices such as BlackBerries. And from what I've seen with my dealings with customers out there, this is a pretty accurate sort of reflection of what's happening in the Australian marketplace. And in particular, I guess that the takeaway here that the mobile device growth rate is just phenomenal. And if anything, we're still seeing that accelerate rather than just continue on a linear trajectory. So what does all this mean? So what this means is that enterprises now are actually facing some very new and interesting challenges that are out there. We no longer are talking about a standard laptop that used to, or even a desktop that used to only live at work. We've had that I guess, introductory phase from desktops to laptops, which were far more mobile devices, and now actually to full-on wireless devices that are out there, which are no longer corporate assets whatsoever. Okay, so at this point in time, we'll open up a web poll. And what you should see there is a web poll just in terms of what are you guys seeing out there, and do you actually have a strategy at this point in time? And the key points here in terms of if you've got a strategy, can you look back objectively at it and tell us how do you think it's working for you? So that'll just appear there. So you've got a few minutes to respond. So please do so, and we'll actually look at the results at the end of the webinar. Okay, so what are we actually dealing with out there? Well, really what we're seeing is, I guess, a range of different end user behaviours out there. So we're seeing this phenomenal growth of devices, and we're also seeing that the workflows of employees are actually changing dramatically. So the concept of actually doing the 9 to 5 at your desk are gone. And the employees are now wanting to work anywhere, anytime, on just about any device they can. And this isn't so much a corporate requirement. This is typically what we're seeing here of pull factors, where employees are demanding this of their employers and saying, this is the way we want to work. You are saying, we, sit at a desk. We're saying, no, we'd much rather do it our own way. The implication for this is that we're not just talking about personal data stored on these devices anymore. The implication is that we're now talking about sensitive corporate data, which could either be commercial in confidence, or which could contain other sensitive data and information that's proprietary. And this still needs to be controlled in ways that meet enterprise security policies. So security, not surprisingly, as a result of all the polls that are done out there, security continues to be the top of mind issue that we're seeing out there in amongst IT managers. We've also seen a significant increase there in mobile malware. So, malicious code that's out there that's specifically targeting mobile devices is another emerging threat. It tends to be more at this point on the Android side of the fence, but you know, certainly people using iOS devices shouldn't be complacent around that either. Okay. So one other thing here, I guess, in terms of corporate policy, is that BYOD can, various enterprises are approaching this in a number of different ways. So the first one is to say, well, you know, pretend it doesn't exist. Pretend there, you know, the problem's not out there. We just want to continue to work in our usual way. And look, for some particular customers, that actually might be the only way. And this might be very specific applications. So defence, certain government departments will just say, no, this is the way it will be, and it's mandated that there will be no BYOD, there will be no Wi-Fi. It's a totally locked down environment, and that, you know, that could well be appropriate for their particular environments. Then we sort of move on to sort of the slightly, I guess, more liberal approach, which focuses on it's allowed, but it's sort of really only tolerated, and you know, it's sort of a problem that we have to accept, but we're certainly not going to go out there and actively encourage it. We're seeing this in a lot of public institutions, educational spaces as well, and also another application there is for just very simple guest access. Then we move on to sort of the next step, which is more of an embracement of the technology, and to say, yeah, look, we see this as being a significant differentiator for us, and in terms of encouraging our employees to work this particular way. And also that there are other different ways, other technologies that are out there, not just mobile devices, but using virtual desktop technologies as well. So there's several different ways to skin that cat, but you know, I guess it's a traditional departure from the lockdown, you know, typical way of thinking. And then finally to the complete other end of the spectrum, which is fully mandated. Not only can you bring your own device, but in this instance, the organisation will actually provide employees with mobility devices and actually encourage their use and go out there and to actively utilise them and leverage the benefits of working in that particular way. And we're seeing this in particular in the retail space. You know, if you go into a mobile phone store outlet there in a shopping mall, you know, typically that's how business is transacted these days. A lot of customers now, where they've got showroom environments, are all moving towards this approach and providing these their employees with these types of devices. So the total opposite end of the spectrum to the what we're seeing in defence, for example. Okay, so what's happening out there? We thought before we get on to the final discussion of the strategy, I'm just going to throw to one of my colleagues who's going to actually give us a couple of minutes perspective on what he's seeing out there with a specific customer of his. So this is Andrew Prime, who's one of the senior account managers here at Logicalis. Andrew.
Good morning, everyone. So I guess there are a number of different customers that we're talking to around this particular challenge, but this one we thought fitted a bit better in terms of the seminar this morning. So they are this particular customer is a state government body. They in the health space. They are responsible for a number of different hospitals and community organisations. And the challenge that they had, well, there were two separate challenges. The first reasons for looking at BYOD was the CEO was given an iPad for Christmas and wanted to make that work on his network or their corporate environment. The second was pressure from the medical community to provide more free access to corporate applications within the hospital environment that they were responsible for. So I guess those were the two reasons why they were trying to address it. When we started discussions with them, they had been having discussions with the vendors directly. Across their network, they have a large Cisco deployment. So Cisco's response was, yep, here's a product which will help you address this issue. So they believed they had bought the right product, and we're working out how they were going to roll this out. So at that point, we started having discussions with them around not so much the technical aspect, but trying to help them from a policy perspective. But we were successful in winning a piece of business which was really around taking a step back from the technical, I guess, deployment and looking at how they were going to arrange the strategy or the policy behind rolling this out across the organisation. So not specifically medical, but across the whole environment. So I guess we provided a different aspect rather than just a vendor point product type of offering. We're able to bring a number of components together to look at the strategy.
Okay, thanks Andrew. And Andrew will be around at the end as well, so if you've got any questions for him, he will also be available for the Q&A at the end. Okay, so moving right along. In terms of actually creating a basic strategy for BYOD and mobility. So what are the actual steps here that we need to consider? So first of all, disclaimer, this is, I guess, a high-level approach. This is a methodology that a range of different customers can use. So we're not trying to be too industry-specific. And each of these will vary, obviously, for your own specific circumstances. So the first one is to actually get out there and develop a business case. If you don't have a compelling business case for BYOD, then why are you doing it? Second one is to actually look at the different types of workflows that you have out there in terms of how they work and what they're actually doing. Third step is to actually then look at the service requirements for each of those categories that you've defined in step 2, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. Actually get into defining the policy in terms of what they can and can't do, how you're going to handle specific situations, and what you actually want to mandate versus how you go about doing this from a user standpoint. And then fifthly, actually, how are you actually going to support all of this? So as you move to this new mobility strategy, actually implement and deploy these sorts of technologies that are out there en masse, your whole support model changes quite significantly. So if you haven't prepared for that, and it can be a double-edged sword. There can be additional costs if you implement it incorrectly, and equally there can be savings, significant savings, if you actually get it right. So we're going to look at some tips there in terms of getting down the right track from a user support model. Okay, so I've got one slide on each of these steps, which I'll run through relatively quickly. Right, so in terms of actual TCO, how do we do this? Actually generating and looking at the ownership costs of the fleet. Look at all your current state situation. What is the network costing you at the moment? What is out there from a hardware asset standpoint? And what are your support costs as well in the current state environment? How much are you paying for software? How much are you paying for lost and stolen devices? And also, what is the financial cost to the organisation when those losses occur? Then we've got to look at what the actual upfront investment is for BYOD. So this isn't just hardware costs, and in fact this is often software and licensing and centralized infrastructure costs, or in terms of outsourcing to data centers, what those ongoing costs will be. And then actual operating costs as well. So in terms of So not just upfront costs, but the ongoing licensing fees, could be bandwidth into data centers, power, etc. So anything to actually keep the lights on as a part of the new methodology. And then actually subtracting from that the savings. So this could be in terms of the cost of the endpoints. So consumerized devices, an iPad or an iDevice might cost substantially less over the 2-3 year life cycle that it's deployed for compared to a corporate desktop or laptop. So yeah, to actually go through there in greater detail and identify those savings. And it could also be, as I said, hardware costs, but also from an operational standpoint as well. And then from that, come up with your overall ROI, return on investment there in terms of the general sums. So this is a pretty quick approach, and obviously this would potentially require weeks or maybe even months of analysis in a particular organisation, depending on how complex it is. But even if it's 80–90% accurate, then you're going to get a feel pretty much straight away as to whether or not this makes sense from a financial standpoint. Secondly, actually looking at the different types of employees that you have out there. And I said employees is probably too specific a term. You really are just looking at your overall workforce. So this isn't just employees, but external staff, contractors, suppliers, anyone who has a business need to interact with your organisation is a better way to define it. And then looking at what their roles are and how they need to interact with your organisation. Why is this important? Because we then need to actually look and see what type of connectivity and what type of service policies need to be applied to those particular work groups. And this can be through traditional ways, as mentioned before, like things like corporate issued laptops, through to virtual desktop endpoints as well. So through solutions such as Citrix, for example, through to full-on mobile devices, and even to non-corporate issued devices as well. And they could be laptops, they could be a range of different endpoints that are out there. Mapping them together and saying, right, what is it that we need in our organisation? And then to cherry pick the ones that are most compelling in your organisation, and focus on those 2 or 3 endpoints that are going to be the most pertinent. Okay, then actually going and defining policy. So as mentioned before, the BYOD costs, this was a study that was done by Cisco last year, and that is the fact that the vast majority of BYOD costs actually have got nothing to do with the device themselves. And this is critical in terms of coming up with support models and the other infrastructure changes that could be required to support this correctly. Not only does IT need to be involved in all of this, but all the other corporate departments as well are stakeholders in this approach, in this strategy. So from a finance standpoint, absolutely. From a legal standpoint as well, what are the legal implications of having the data out there on these devices? And making sure that what the risk to the organisation is should that data actually be compromised. Open standards, being able to support multiple types of hardware and operating systems, and potentially different types of security solutions from out there as well. There's a range of different security approaches to BYOD, and I guess adhering to open standards there, so we can go down, we're not locked in. Okay, and probably one of the other ones here, defining rules of use. I put this at the bottom, but this is probably one of the most important aspects to consider in policy design. Why? Because corporate rules of use set the expectations here so that employees, as I said, anyone who is using a mobile device for business use clearly understands what the rules of engagement are. And that, first of all, is, and these should be written in plain English, not legalese, that they are under no misapprehension as to what can happen in certain scenarios. And if the device is lost or believed to be compromised, but the organisation reserves the right to either remotely wipe the device totally, or, and this once again depends on the types of mobile device management apps that are out there, maybe just erase the corporate information that's stored therein. So there's two different ways of doing that, but at the end of the day, it comes back to protecting corporate data on that device. Secondly, requiring an acceptable level of password policy on the device. Could be a 4-digit PIN, could be 27-letter password, whatever is appropriate to your organisation, and then setting a timeout on that as well. So if the device is left unattended, that it locks automatically. And thirdly, that users are actually obliged to report a lost or stolen device immediately. Pretty obvious, but once again, making sure that the employee or the contractor clearly understands their obligations in this situation. So they must accept this in writing when signing up for the service, and it's about getting that balance right between employee trust and IT control. So I can't tell you where you need to be on that curve, but you need to look at where you want to be, what's the right fit for your particular organisation on that particular curve. And as I said earlier, no jargon, no legalese, it's just in plain black and white as to what the expectations are. Okay, defining those corporate policies at a corporate level in terms of service entitlement, who gets them, what devices there are, and so from a company executive standpoint, those sorts of policies would be signed off at. Then down at the local level, this could be along the lines of a line manager specifying once again what can and cannot be rolled out there and what employees have entitlement to, and also having an appropriate approval level there as well at the various levels. So at MD, line manager, and also employee agreement that they are signing up and actually putting something in writing to say that this is what they're signing up for and they understand the rules of engagement. And probably the most critical aspect in all of this is coming up with a sensible user support model. So as mentioned earlier, BYOD has the potential to increase the workload on IT staff if this is not done right as a result of consumerization. It's an IDC study done a couple of years ago, and based on my experiences with customers there, I don't think those numbers have really changed in the last couple of years. And that is that BYOD has the potential to really make a heck of a lot more work for people if it's just deployed without adequate thought to a support model. IT budgets, we don't have more money to play with. Often it's less, so we've got to work smarter. But it's not all bad news here. BYOD gives us the ability to allow users to self-help. That really is the key in all of this. If IT can set the model up in such a way that that users know and can be self-remediated, this can be done in either an automated fashion or through proper training or wikis, where they can actually resolve some of the more basic connectivity problems. So IT might support things like connectivity problems, applications that are installed on those devices. The actual hardware themselves, devices would be supported by the vendors in terms of who's providing the actual hardware. And probably the most critical part of this is that there is a community knowledge of information. These could be either public forums or these could be intranet forums for organisation-specific information where knowledge is shared, best practices are shared, and users can actually get access to the information that they need to sort and resolve the majority of their issues. An example of that is, like I said, a corporate intranet or corporate wiki that actually has a lot of those sorts of, where are you, what area are you in, what workflow are you using, and giving them access to resources to self-remediate, to sort their problems out without having to raise a service case. Oops, sorry, I'm the wrong way. Okay. Okay, so just in summarising here, BYOD, it's happening, whether IT wants it to or not. Okay, actually, here we go. Remiss. We have a poll here as well. Sorry, guys. So this is the second of the two polls. What are you doing out there? Have you used any of these particular steps in your own strategy? And how successful have they been for you? So just opening up the second poll for you guys. Take a couple of minutes to respond, and we can cover those off in the Q&A session as well. Okay, so just in closing here, as I said, BYD, it's happening whether you want it to or not. People, your employees, your contractors, your suppliers, they're out there using their own devices. They will want to use their own devices. So you can either push back and say, no, we're not going to support this, we're going to outlaw it, or you can embrace it and help it to occur and actually benefit from some of the cost savings in working this particular way. So position IT not as a barrier to all of this, but actually as the enabler, and it can be. When it comes back to a philosophical change here and saying, yeah, we are going to encourage people, and it may not be straight away, so long as people know that this is a roadmap as to how they're going to get there, and that IT is listening and IT is open to new ideas and to helping employees work the way that they want to work. Leverage that trend because it's out there. Your employees are, most likely asking for this already. Don't try and boil the ocean in your first iteration. Just pick out those use cases where you will gain the most benefit. And so this could be out there at the customer-facing side of the organisation, if that's what it is, or in terms of internally. Test the waters before you get out there and do this. So, pick out a few, do a proof of concept, get out there and test it in the lab before just deploying it en masse. And finally, getting that right balance between security for what your organisation requires and the client experience that you are looking to support. And there's a lot of different tools out there, mobile device management suites, a range of different posture assessment tools. These are all things within our toolbox to roll this out and to do it in a scalable, supportable,